So, as I mentioned in past videos, it's currently National Poetry Writing Month, which means that for the whole month of April, I and some other people, poets mostly of course, are going to be writing a poem every day for the whole month. Now we're about halfway through, and so I figured it was about time that I share with you one of the poems that I've written this month, both so that I could share another poem with you guys, because it's been a long time since I've shared with you guys a poem that I've written, and also partly so that I could show you a little bit what work in progress looks like, and especially because this poem is untitled. So I would really like some suggestions for titles, because I'm honestly not too great at coming up with titles. Sometimes something in particular will just feel right or snap into place. Something either feels like it's a common theme that I can easily stick in there, or a sort of clever wordplay or something like that. But with this one, nothing's really stood out so far. So if you guys have any suggestions, please let me know. And I will put the text for the actual poem so that you can read along. I'll put a link to that on my Facebook page, which is always linked in the description below. So, yeah, I'm going to read the poem to you guys. You guys can help me come up with a title. You can leave a comment or something, and I'll let you know if I choose one of your guys' titles to adopt for my poem. And then afterwards, I'm going to explain a little bit about what inspired me and what brought me to write this poem the way I did. So, that way, for those of you who do also write poetry, you have a little bit of an idea of where I get my inspiration from, and maybe you guys can use it as a prompt to find a similar place to get your inspiration from for the next poem. So, yeah. Another note, most of the poems that I've read to you that are mine have come out of that little green book, but this one is so new, I've copied it down onto a sheet of paper, but I haven't copied it into that book yet. And of course, this is also because it doesn't have a title yet, so when it has a title, I can write it in the book, and I can put the title there. So here goes. You once told me you were named after a ship, a powerful ocean liner in a movie your parents once loved. You carry so much. Your presence is loud, and you hold yourself, barrel-chested, stand tall. I can taste your salt when I think of your kiss. The sea scent spray, one whiff reminds me of you. Take me into your cabin. I want to lay my hands all over your deck. So batten down your hatches before you find yourself lost at me. The way I caress your coastlines, how I hold you, I am surprised. You haven't realized. My namesake is a storm. So this is a style of poem that I really like doing, which is taking a theme that you weave through the entire poem and sort of use a lot of metaphor and imagery that fits with that theme. So I start with, you were named after a ship. Specify an ocean liner to sort of give yourself an image of what kind of person this is. He's not some little sailboat. He's not some old-fashioned pirate ship. He's like a powerful ocean liner. That he carries a lot. His presence is loud, so this is stuff that's going along with the ocean liner. Like carry as in literally and also figuratively carrying with the ship and the person. Presence is loud, and holding yourself barrel-chested. Barrel is sort of related to ships, I guess. Makes me think of barrels on pirate ships, but basically giving yourself an image of who this person is. And then it goes into, I can taste your salt when I think of your kiss. So it goes into the love poem aspect of it. So you're describing the person, what they're like, Because I think one thing that helps a lot with love poems especially is you can talk about being in love with someone, but if you can't get a whiff of who they are, then it could easily be written about anyone. Whereas this is like, a person who carries a lot and doesn't say a lot about them, but it gives you the image of the ship that they are, according to this metaphor. And so then it can taste your salt when I think of your kiss. It goes into a little bit of the romance, a little bit of the sort of love and lust aspect. Take me into your cabin, stuff like that. And then I like the batten down your hatches before you find yourself lost at me. Lost instead of lost at sea, it's lost at me. So then that's when you start to notice, that's when things turn a little bit. Then it starts to be, I'm a little dangerous and you might get lost. And it throws you a hint of it, and then starts to go the way I caress your coastlines, how I hold you. It goes back into the, romantic part, and it says, I'm surprised you haven't realized my namesake was a storm. And then that hits you. So it doesn't feel like the end is like a full, all of a sudden everything's different, because you got a little hint of it earlier. But there it is at the end. My namesake was a storm. And then suddenly you have this image of power that, compared to a storm, is just so fragile, like ships as these big, majestic beings almost. And then a storm which could just wreck one with just a flick of its hand. A lot of personification going on here, of course, but this poem, I came up with the idea of it based off of a quote, and you may recognize this quote. It's been passed around the internet. It's been attributed to Marilyn Monroe and various people by different usernames on the internet when someone's said it or changed the words and said something like it, and then it's been screenshotted and passed around. But the person who wrote it, at least from what I found, and I forgot to write down the name of the book she wrote, but the name of the writer herself is Caitlin, I believe it's Siehl, Siehl. I wrote it on the back of this sheet so that I could read you guys the quote. Caitlin Siehl. And she wrote this in a book of hers that's like about sex and love and relationships or something. I forget. Because again, I haven't read the book. I just know the quote. But when I looked it up and I found her quotes page, there's a lot of good stuff, so maybe I should read something by her. Anyway, this quote is, "Do not fall in love with people like me. I will take you to museums and parks and monuments and kiss you in every beautiful place so that you can never go back to them without tasting me like blood in your mouth. I will destroy you in the most beautiful way possible, and when I leave, you will finally understand why storms are named after people." So that quote is almost a poem in itself, but it has similar themes to my poem, and this is a theme that I've written about a lot, about feeling from the perspective of something that is like, I guess, very femme fatale. It's one of those sort of archetypes that I find myself being really drawn to and finding really artistically interesting, because you never hear the femme fatale's perspective. So, the femme fatale is rarely the main character of any given story, so I like writing from that perspective, but sort of reinforcing the archetype in interesting ways. The poems that I tend to end up liking tend to be, like this, where it's like, you're powerful, but I'm more powerful. Essentially, that's why you start off with the ship, something powerful, and then you end with the storm, which is more powerful. But this, you will finally understand why storms are named after people. I remember a stewing in that line for a while, and then thinking, ships are also named after people. I mean, people are sometimes named after ships. So even though he isn't the person who I wrote this poem about specifically, I do know someone who was named after a ship, although in this case specifically it was his last name. But, ships are named after people, people are named after ships. Same thing with storms, storms are named after people. I think ships are primarily named after women, but sometimes you get a surname out of it. Was it Columbus's ships were like Nina, Pinta, Santa Maria. Santa Maria is obviously a female name. But storms have, they have Hurricane Ike and they have Sandy, so people. So I was thinking about that, and about namesakes as storms and ships, and these images of power, and thinking about how, if someone were to say, oh yeah, I was named after a ship, and someone else could say, I was named after a storm, so my namesake could destroy your namesake, sort of in the ways that kids might say, oh yeah, my dad could totally beat up your dad, something like that. So then I thought about that, and then I thought about using that as a sort of metaphor in a relationship where there's an obvious power dynamic, and especially in a situation where one person seems to have more power, in this case the person who's the ship. You see how much they carry, how powerful they are, and then you don't realize, it doesn't tell you until the end, I'm surprised you haven't realized my namesake was a storm. So the storm you didn't really see coming. The storm is someone who holds a sort of hidden power. That's another thing I really like the idea of, is you don't always see how powerful a person is. Sometimes it's very blatant. It's, the person might be a really well-known lecturer or writer or a philosopher, and you can just see how much power they exude because they're used to being in that role. And sometimes it's really sneaky and you don't see it coming. And it's almost like the story of the underdog, you don't see him coming because you're super sneaky and you don't expect much of them, but they're greater than you expect. I like applying all of these ideas and tropes to things like relationships where you might not normally find them, and it causes some interesting poems about unhealthy relationships. But healthy relationships can often be pretty boring to write about. Like, I admittedly do have a really hard time writing love poems that don't just sound sappy, because there are only so many ways you can say, I'm drowning in your eyes, or whatever else. Whereas when something's wrong, it's easy to give them character, That's why they don't write stories where absolutely nothing goes wrong, then there wouldn't be a story. So, to wrap up this rambling about poetry, the quote. Quotes are a really good source for poetic muse, at least I find. And I love quotes. I love collecting quotes. There are a few quote websites where you can just select a figure from history who said a lot of well-known stuff. I found who this quote was attributed to on one of those sites. So look up Caitlin Seal, the name that I gave you for the quote. You can find this quote and a lot of other interesting stuff that she's said or written. And there's some good stuff there, so if you like this quote, maybe you should check that out. But anyone you can think of who has said stuff that is quotable, you can through their quotes. And especially if you have a figure whose presence you want to embody in a specific way, you know? Like if you want to write a poem that feels very Marilyn Monroe, you could go and read through her quotes and gain inspiration from that. A lot of the times, reading quotes and stuff will give you an idea of these images and ideas and themes, you know. With Marilyn, there was a lot about beauty and laughter and living and stuff like that. Those were some pretty common themes for her. So if you wanted to write a poem that felt like a Marilyn Monroe quote, then you would use those same themes. Similar to this quote, there was the theme of, you know, I'm going to hurt you in a way that is beautiful. And so you write a poem like I did, where you build up all these beautiful moments and you end with a punch that says, you know I spent the last minute telling you how great you are in all this metaphor, but I'm going to hurt you real bad. And that's another thing, is if you have a chance to use a shocker towards the middle or the end, because if everything's the same for the whole poem, then it can kind of get boring, especially with a particularly long poem. But having something where things slowly change over the course of the poem, or the first half is one thing, and then something changes and suddenly it's different, those tend to hook people, especially ones where you can read them again and again, and it'll sort of, you'll pick up different things each time. So yeah, that's my poetic ramblings, both poetic in the poetic sense and poetic in the with regards to poetry sense. Please let me know if you have any ideas for what you would title the poem I've read. Like I said, I intend to post the full text on my Facebook page below. And also just let me know more ideas for poetry for requests. I've almost made it through all of my requests now that I'm doing the poetry requests. Some of them are getting to be a little too long or hard to find of the requests that I've noted down, so unfortunately I won't be able to do all of them, but I'm going to try to get to that point. So, yeah, and otherwise I will see you guys